Hey everybody, today we're going back to 2008 and taking a look at Municipium by Dr. Reiner Knizia. This is a 2 to 4 player board game that takes around an hour to play on average. Before I get into my thoughts on Municipium, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. So Municipium is an area control and set collection style game, and the board is going to look like this at a setup where you have a bunch of different locations numbered from 0 up to 6. So let's start from the center and go clockwise round. So we have the temple in the center here, then we have the tavern, the baths, we have the emporium, the basilica, the forum, and the praetorium. Now during setup, we as the players have been distributing our family members around, and these are going to be the tokens used to control the different regions. And the objective of this game is to try and collect sets of these different meeple civilians. And for each set consisting of the 4 different colors, you are going to cash them in and gain one of these coins. And it's going to be a race to get to either 4 or 5 coins, depending on how long you want the game to be. In addition to the components that you can see here, the game consists of these prefix favor tokens, which have been distributed onto these prefix spots around the board. And these are essentially a wild civilian type. So this can proxy any type to count towards those sets. You also have these wreaths, which are used to boost the strength of your family members. We've already talked about the coins, and each player is also going to get given an identical set of 3 cards, and these can only be used once during the game. As soon as they're used, they're going to be flipped over and never to be used again. So once they're gone, they are gone. So you have the Your Powers card, the Citizens Invitations card, and the Great Family card, and we'll talk about what they do later. There's also a communal deck of cards which do have several duplicate cards in them, such as this Prefix Visit card. You have the One Power card, the Citizen Visit card, and so on. But there's only a few in here, so you've got a pretty good idea on what that deck consists of. So let's take a look at how the game actually works. So the turn structure couldn't be much more simple, where all you do on your turn is you have the option to move one of your family members twice or 2 of your family members once, following these roads, of course. So it would be a perfectly legal move for me to say move this guy from here and then to here. Or, of course, I can move 2 separate guys 1 space along those roads. And once you're settled with your movement, you are going to have the option to take one of 2 actions. The first of which is to use one of your personal cards, and the other one is to top deck this deck here and resolve the relevant action. And most of these actions correspond to the different locations on the board. So let's take a look at what they do and their special powers. So in the center of the board here, we have the temple, and the temple is used to dictate the player initiative order. And that initiative order is important because it is going to allow you to break ties when it comes to sharing locations with other players. Like, for example, here, the Basilica, the pink and the yellow player both have 1 family member there, but because the yellow is higher up in player initiative order, then they are going to break that tie. Now, something that's worth noting is that with each of these locations, only the player who has the majority there will gain the benefit from that location. So after the temple, we have the tavern. Now the tavern, as the controlling player, is going to allow you to choose any color of meeple from one location and move them to the tavern. So for example, if I was the pink player, I could say, let's use my my pink meeple from over here because I'm not controlling it, and let's use it to bolster my strength over here. Or I can even use that to move another player to there should I wish to. After that, we have the baths. So the baths will allow you to, as the controlling player, move your pieces to the center of the board here, back to the temple, and then place one of these wreaths on the crown of your meeple, like so, meaning that that meeple is now, or that family member is now worth strength 2, so it makes them twice as strong. But of course, in order to do that, you're going to have to remove them from the baths and give up your control. The Emporium allows you to reach into this bag here and draw out the citizen meeples until one location has exactly 3 of those meeples on them. And when you draw these meeples out blindly, you have to place them on the corresponding color, with the exception of these purple meeples which can go anywhere. So I've just drawn this red meeple out. I'm going to place it here on the tavern. Now, should I wish to, and I did draw another red, I can place it on that location again, and whoever's got the majority in that location, in this example, the pink player, will gain 2 of those meeples, and whoever's in second place will gain 1. Next up, we have the Basilica, which allows you to cash in 3 different coloured meeples for a coin rather than the usual 4. So it's got a nice little shortcut there. If you don't want to do that, you can simply draw a citizen from the bag. Penultimately, we have the Forum, which allows you to take a citizen from another player's collection or take one citizen from any institution. So if you are really desperate for a particular colour, then you can reach there straight away on the map and take it into your supply, or again, you can steal it off another player. And finally, we have the Praetorium at number 6 here, which allows you to reposition all of your family members on the board to completely change the board states. So now we've talked about how to move your meeples around and what all the different locations do. Let's go into the card phase of the round. And that is where you choose to either activate one of your personal cards or you choose to flip over and resolve one of the communal deck. So in your personal cards, you have these 3 options, which the first one here is the Your Powers card, which allows you to exert the powers in the locations where you have the most influence. If you have a really strong board state at the time, then you can choose to activate all the ones that you control and the ones that you control only. The next one is the Citizen Invitations one here, which simply allows you to draw 4 meeples one at a time from the bag and place them on locations. Of course, if you're placing them on the locations that you're controlling, that's going to be great because you're going to get control of those meeples. And the final one here is the Great Family one here, which allows you to move the prefect instantly to the next location. Now, monitoring where the prefect is and where it's going to go next is a big part of the game, because as soon as the prefect reaches a new location, you are going to have a look who has the most family members in that location and then distribute these 2 pieces out accordingly. So whoever's got the most here, in this example, the yellow player has 2 to the blue's 1, is going to gain this prefect favor token, which, as we discussed earlier, is a wild citizen. And whoever's in second place will gain this randomly distributed citizen out there. So let's take a look at all the cards in the deck here. So first up, we have this most common one, which is the Prefect Visit, which forces you to move the prefect. And because you know that prefect is always going around in a clockwise order, you can always try to shift all your family members there and compete for control of those tokens, which of course are very valuable because they are wilds. And we also have the Citizen Visit here, which means that each player in turn order will draw 1 citizen from the bag and place it on any corresponding location. We've got more prefix there. We have the 1 power ability there, where every player exerts 1 power where they have the most influence. So you can pick and choose which ones you control and use those powers. We already talked about the Citizen's Visit. That's another 1 power. So you can see here there are quite a lot of duplicates, so you do have some good predictability in what's in that deck. But finally, we have this one here, which is the All Powers card, which means that every single location will be activated in numerical order. And that can really mess with each other, because you can see that things will be triggered before the other things, which could mess things up later in that order. And that is essentially how the game is going to play. In turn order, it's going to keep on moving your family members around, activating your personal cards, activating the communal cards, and the player with the most coins, or the first to reach 4 or 5 coins, will be the winner. Okay, so let's share some thoughts on Municipium. And I want to start with a portion of the game that I was apprehensive about when reading the rules for the first time. And that is the idea of flipping these cards over at random and obviously resolving the corresponding ability. Now, at face value, that was quite concerning for me because it sounded swingy and random, where in practice, it actually works really well because it adds some excitement to the game. It keeps the game moving and keeps it flowing. And because there is only a few cards in this deck, there's only like 12 cards or so, you've got a good idea of what's going to come up, because there are, much more common to find these Prefect Visit cards in there than, say, the Activate All Powers cards. So you're always trying to manipulate the board state with a good degree of predictability on what's going to come out next. If no prefect cards have come out yet, there's going to be one soon. Therefore, you want to start shifting your family members to the next location where the prefect is going to be. Or if it's that Citizen Visit card, like so, maybe you will try and get a monopoly on 2 of the locations where you know that you need the corresponding meeple of. Therefore, when players draw that coloured meeples, they are forced to place them on one of those locations. Then you'll get to reap the rewards of that by collecting 2 of the meeples as compared to their 1 single meeple. And what it also means is that it makes your personal cards here that much more powerful and that much more meaningful as to when you are going to use them, because these are the only options where you have full autonomy over your turn. And knowing when to use them at the perfect time is quite a crunchy decision, because you do not want to waste them. And of course, you want to strike when the iron's hot and not miss any opportunities either. Like, when you're controlling a majority of regions and you use your powers card, you can get a lot of rewards that way. You might only need a single meeple in the baths here, and you can upgrade one to a level 2 meeple. And so on. You can manipulate the board state after if you're collecting this one. Maybe you have 3 meeples and now is the time to strike by cashing them in to get a coin for only 3, and so on. So you can really see that you are constantly trying to manipulate the board state, considering so many different things. Not only the meeples you want to collect, but the powers of those locations as well. As a general rule, I tend to enjoy games where you have to compete for turn order and where turn order is meaningful. And boy, oh boy, is it meaningful in this game. You always have to keep an eye on that turn order in the temple, because there are obviously a very limited amount of family members on the board, and you want to be using them all as optimally as possible, meaning that you'll probably have a lot of ties at all times. So therefore, beating that initiative order, on the temple is so important and can really help things swing in your favor. So yeah, I really like the way that worked, and I like the way it only changes when that location is activated. So you might have the majority there, like the yellow does here at the moment, but until that location is activated, it won't change. And because some of those cards in the deck are only activate one location, you have to make that decision of, do I want to change the order and maybe help me long term, or do I want to seize the opportunity and use another location where I'm controlling now? I think each of the different locations are highly interesting, and I like the way that there's only 7 of them and they all become very familiar pretty quickly. And this is definitely one of those games where if you are playing with the same people again and again, the experience is going to become richer, and it becomes a bit more chess-like in the way you manipulate the board state, knowing when to give up one thing to move to another location to exploit its ability and go for the corresponding meeples. So yeah, I love how familiar it becomes, and I like that each of them has their own role to play. I must say that I enjoy that this game has a different winning condition when it comes to an area control game, because normally with area control games you are competing for points. If you control this region you'll get X amount of points and so on. This one you are building towards sets, so it definitely feels different in that respect. Now what I also like is that means that if somebody is kind of running away with it, doing really well with the game, you can always conspire with your other opponents to try and hinder that runaway leader from gaining specific meeples. If they really want a red meeple, you can kind of start shifting over this side of the board and block them from doing so. But although you have some degree of control of stopping somebody from running away with it, they might have a plan B in the works and can try something else by maybe snatching a meeple off you or doing something else. So you've always got that a degree of control of stopping somebody from running away, but not complete control where you are completely debilitating them. So definitely struck a really good balance there where you can put pressure on the leader but not completely block them out of the game. I suppose it goes without saying that this game does have a ton of player interaction. It's a pivotal part of the game, but I do like the way the balance is struck here, with the game being, somewhat in your face, but not being cruel or spiteful for the sake of it. I suppose the biggest degree of interaction you have, or the mean interaction you have, is by shifting a bunch of people's family members to the tavern and ruining their plans, or stealing a meeple from them. But you are generally doing that with the idea of trying to catch up with them or trying to do yourself good. You're not being cruel for the sake of it. And I definitely think that, there's a really well struck balance there between being meaningful but not spiteful. I think the game scales well at 3 or 4 players. Now the box does say it caters to 2 players as well, but personally I wouldn't advocate that, as would be the case with most area control style games. You want that wild card, or 1 or 2 wild cards I suppose in a 3 or 4 player game, just to add more variables into the experience. But that being said, this is definitely one of those games where if you play it again and again with the same game group, there is going to be longevity here, because the more you become familiar with these locations, it becomes more tactical and the decisions become more meaningful as you mull over the consequences to your actions. Maybe you are going to lump in and try to dominate the prefect this round, but if you're doing that, then maybe it's going to be an activate all locations card instead, and you're going to miss out on that. So you have to consider what is going to be the upside and downside to making every single move I make here. The production for the game is absolutely fine. If you watch my content regularly, you might know that I'm a fan of this style of visual, beige design, I suppose. And I like the way that the pieces are these traditional wooden, pawns instead of miniatures or anything like that. And it's really cool that these little kind of wreaths fit on the crown of your meeples like so, to show which ones are stronger than others. Now, I understand this isn't going to be everybody's taste. It might look a bit bland for some people, but that's fine, but it does what it does well. All these components work as they should. There's not a cluster of stuff on the table. It's quite easy to set up and pack away because it is quite minimalistic, I suppose. And the card quality is fine as well. They are linen finished. They're not the best, thickest stock, but still definitely going to hold up to repeated plays. Okay, so let's share some final thoughts on Municipium. Now, I am under no illusion that this game is an acquired taste. It's not going to be for everybody, and a big part of that is because of the visuals. This is definitely a beige game. It's not got all the glitz and glamour as a lot of the more modern area control titles. And I think if I was to play this in my, say, first or second year within the hobby, I might even be underwhelmed by it because I don't understand the things that make this game special. Because, you might want something a bit more in your face, something a bit more punchy and a bit more, loud and exciting, I suppose, if you want to put it that way. But I think after you've played 50 or 100 different area control games, things like this start to earn their merit in a different way. And I really appreciate the sophistication of the game and how all the different kind of components of the game merge together well to create a really rich experience. And that might not be obvious at first when you consider that a big part of the game is top decking this deck of cards. That for me was a big red flag. I wasn't really interested in seeing how this worked, but boy oh boy was I wrong. This helps the game rather than hinder it, which is a huge, it's a rare thing for me to say when it comes to top decking a pile of cards there. I love how you are competing on a number of different fronts at all times here. Not only have you got this straightforward strategy of trying to chase the prefect around and try to gain those very useful prefect favors, but if you're going to do that, you're going to be missing out on something else, gaining the abilities of the different locations or controlling them to get 2 out of 3 of the meeples available. So all of it is extremely useful, and that usefulness will shift during different points in the game. Now, it's no use controlling the red regions if you have a bunch of the red meeples, but maybe that's not the case because you might want the power and so on. If I'm completely honest, after reading the rulebook for the first time, I wasn't quite sure where the fun was going to come from in this game, and that actually did come into practice during the first half of our first game. We were kind of just going through the motions, not really seeing the nuances, not really making good decisions. But when that kind of second half of the game came into play, it really started to click with us, and we started to think, we should be doing this rather than this. And it really started to become exciting. Everybody was very invested in the game. So as I mentioned, this is definitely a game that rewards repeated plays once you know how everything clicks together and how those gears and cogs work. And because that first game was such a pleasant surprise, I wanted to get it back to the table soon after to make sure that I've not got rose-tinted glasses in this one. Maybe sometimes you leave the game with a better impression than it was simply because it was better than you thought it would be, where the second play of this game was even better than the first, which is always a good sign. Now, that being said, I would definitely recommend you play until 4 coins rather than the 5 coins because there's not a huge game arc in the game. You're always doing the same thing from start to finish. So, playing to 4 coins simply makes the game shorter, which is always a good thing. To summarise my rambling thoughts here, this game is absolutely fantastic. I'm really impressed with the way this game is put together, which I shouldn't really say because at this point I have so much trust in Reiner Knizia. And if you watch my Chairman's Choice Awards, this game came out with the Hidden Gem of the Year. Now, I know Reiner Knizia makes so many games, but when games of this quality get lost to the annals of time, it is just criminal because how many generic, boring and rinse and repeat area control games are released each year. None of them can hold a candle to this game, and yet nobody plays it, nobody talks about it. Hence why I really wanted to share this video with you guys, because I know you all have great taste. So I really recommend this one. If you want something again a bit more nuanced, a bit more sophisticated than your standard in-your-face area control style games, then you could do a lot worse than Municipium. It's gone straight into my collection, and I'm really excited to play it more and more.